attack on a farm last night. At least one person was left in a coma in the Harrismith area. It comes after an attack in KwaZulu-Natal over the weekend that saw an elderly couple being murdered. Yesterday, the National Assembly held a debate on the issue of murders on farms. Agri-SA says there's been an increase in the number of attacks on farms this year, but can't yet compare it to last year's figure. Wouter Wessels is the spokesperson for the Freedom Front Plus. Mr. Wessels, good afternoon to you. Do you know how big the increase in the number of farm attacks has been so far?
Well, we saw a significant increase, especially during the lockdown period, with about 40 to 50 attacks taking place per month during the last 4 months. We saw a significant increase in the recent few days, especially over the weekend, with a significant number of attacks in Northwest, in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Free State, as you've just mentioned.
Agri-SA has said in the past that most of these seem to be about robbery, in other words, theft is the motive. Do you think that's the case, or do you think there's something else?
Well, what we say is it is time to again do a very reliable study and inquiry into the causes of these attacks. Because, yes, robbery is definitely an intention. If you go and look at what is stolen, especially guns that are stolen on farms. But then what is worrisome is the fact that there's a lot more brutality involved in these attacks and murders. And that is something that distinguishes these crimes from normal crime in South Africa. If you really go and look at the brutality and the gruesome nature of these attacks.
Is this having an impact on the number of people who are farming in South Africa, or on the number of people who are on the land?
We are convinced it does. You know, the moment a farmer is murdered, the family will move away from the farm. There's proof thereof. And, that farm workers lose their livelihoods. There's a void that's then created, and it definitely creates a situation where we've seen over the last 20 odd years a decrease in the number of commercial farmers in South Africa.
I've got numbers in front of me from the community survey. Now, this is research that's been conducted by the economist, Professor Johan Kirsten. I'm sure you'll know him at the Bureau for Economic Research. I mean, the numbers that he's looking at from the community survey in 2016 suggest that in 2009, in terms of farmers with a turnover of over 10 million rand, there were 3,814. In 2016, there were 5,135. I mean, if we look at what you'd call medium-sized farmers, the figure hasn't really changed. From 2009, there was a figure of 2,477. In 2016, 2,676. Now, I appreciate the logic. If there is an attack, if the farmer is killed, if enough farm workers are killed, people will leave the land. I don't disagree with you. It doesn't seem to reflect in these numbers, though.
Yes, but if you go and look at the majority of commercial farmers in South Africa, does have an annual turnover of less than 2 million rand. Those figures that you mentioned now is the elite of commercial farmers, and it doesn't really include the majority. If you go and look at the majority that cannot afford very intense security, private security on their farms, the nature of a farm is not as easy as to privately secure as a residential home. It's millions of rands to secure a farm privately. That's what makes our rural community much more vulnerable. And that is those farmers that just survive, that cannot afford private security, and they are getting less and less. If you really go and look at our numbers, where we went from more than 45,000 farmers about 15 years ago to now just over the 37,000 commercial farmers.
Well, I mean, the figure I have from the community survey, and the figure in the section of farms that have a turnover of between 1 million and 6 million. Again, 2009, 13,306. 2016, 13,220. I mean, there's hardly any change there.
Well, that's not the figures we have. As you know, Stephen, I worked at the Department of Agriculture, and the official figures that the Department of Agriculture has do differ from those. But the point of the matter is, every farmer that's lost at the end of the day is food security that are threatened, and it is a whole community that suffers because of the value chain. If you go and look at our rural towns, our rural economy is suffering because of rural security and rural safety not taking priority by this government. And that is the bottom line. We can play with figures all around, but at the end of the day, we have a serious problem. If you look at the brutality firstly, if you look at the prevalence of these attacks, then there is definitely a problem. And just as gang-related violence, just as transito-related crimes, this should also be a priority crime in South Africa.